already did if the announcer was sentenced for the bad stuff he's did. Now it's Four's turn. And unlike the announcer, Four has done some pretty messed up things that were worse than the announcer. But will he get a worse sentence than the announcer? Let's find out. So first up, he mutilates Pin. Seems like life in prison for me. Well, for Four, actually. Then he screeched at people 18 times. I don't know if they died or if they just went deaf from that. But I'm just going to make it 18 years instead of life, since they didn't really die. And yeah, and now he straight up murdered Pillow. I don't care if you bought her back afterwards. Murder is murder. And then he imprisons so many people just because they lost inside his head to do schoolwork. And again, nobody deserves it because Four is way more evil than the people who you would say deserved it. So you know what? Life in prison. Wow. So far Four is doing better than the announcer. And now he imprisons 8 more people inside of Jawbreakers. This time it was the 8 people who died. I'm still going to give this a life in prison one. A life in prison sentence. And then he imprisons Taco for a long, long time. Life in prison. Since Gelatin is a child, Four just straight up murdered a child in BFB 3. Making this life in prison once again. Wow, just like the announcer, Four is in prison for the rest of his life. That mean comment he said to X was bad enough to be sentenced to anger management. I'm just kidding. But anyways, but seriously though, he should go to anger management because he has a lot of anger problems. But then he slaps Nickel. Yep. That's a month in jail for him. And then he gives out magical earths. I have no idea how nobody else caught this. But they can damage the earth if someone's not careful. So, Four's getting life in prison for that. Moving on to BFB 5, where he threatens Pi and Black Hole, and the rest of Death Pact at that, to do stuff like make them tremble, which, by the way, for people who don't know, is shaking in fear, or to take off their limbs, aka, which stands for also known as, dismemberment. He's good. So that's life in prison again. And then he said he's going to do something worse to X than screeching, all just because X interrupted him. He could have told him not to do it. But Four went straight up to violence. And then when the book asks where X went, Four says limb reattachment center. So that's mutilation. Four straight up dismembered him by ripping off his limbs. Yep, that's life in prison again. Then he murdered Black Hole and Lightning. Life in prison again. And now Four just did what he did to Pin, to Foldy. Mutilated her. Life in prison for that. But only a month in jail for assaulting Stapy, hitting Stapy with a laser. Since I'm going to assume Stapy didn't die this time. Yeah, I know what you're going to say. This time. Yep, this time. Then he attempted to murder Nickel the same way he did to Gelatin. So you know what? That's life in prison again. They switched bodies in episode 12. So 4 straight up tried to murder Ruby just for throwing pickles on him. So that's life in prison again. But good thing X stopped him. But then he straight up hits Gady with a laser. So that's a month in jail. 4 is getting off way easier than the announcer, despite being way more evil than him. Wait a minute, doesn't that technically mean the announcer is more evil than 4? But either way, 4 is getting a month for hitting Gady. Assault with soup times 2, 2 months, which is 1 month per time he hits someone with hot soup. He only hit Spongy and Barfback with hot soup, but then he mutilated Ice Cube. Life. And OMG, now he just straight up murder Clock. And this time he planned to do it. Life in prison, definitely. Because planning to murder someone is even worse than doing it without even planning. Then he straight up murders Basketball. I don't care if she called you pudgy. That's no excuse to murder someone. So you know what? 4 is getting life in prison again. And now he slaps Nelly. Take him in the car and throw them handcuffs on. Balloony mutilation. He straight up mutilated Balloony. Which is life in prison again. The time he murdered Lollipop doesn't count because it was on accident. And he was just trying to help. He just damaged the Free Smart Supervan. I would say that's worth a week in jail. Then when X is on fire, 4 could have just put him out of his pain now. But instead, he decides to wait until next week to do it. Just for a contest. Life in prison for gross negligence. Then every time a contestant has damaged the environment, it's 4's fault because he's the one who made the contest rules. Life. He's locked him in jail for the rest of his life. He could have given these contestants air sooner to breathe, but he decided to wait. What kind of sick little criminal is this? Well, at least he's going off easier than the announcer. So I would consider yourself lucky for that you got off easier than the announcer, because he just got life in prison. 4, you got easier sentences. Then he murders Blocky. Yeah, I don't care if he made a terrible joke. That's no excuse for murder. Then he imprisons the contestants again in spinning cages, which is torture for them. Definitely life in prison for each contestant. Now breaking Flower's flower pot. Yep. That's a year in the slammer. His first year in the slammer. Then he trespasses on Yellowface's property. Yep. That's a year for him. Now he escapes prison. Well, it was basically cardboard, so it wasn't really a prison, so I'm not going to sentence him for that. You know what? Every time he murdered someone is automatically life in prison. You know what? for everything that he's done, he's fired from hosting. He's fired from hosting. He's fired from hosting. Then he murders X 2 times. Then Purple Face. Life. For the rest of his felonies, life in prison. But then he does apologize for everything that he's done in BFB 30. And he seems like he really meant it. So he's pardoned. He's no longer under arrest. He's off scot-free now. So I guess 4 is free to go now.